If you're going to follow along with me in your own Bibles today, you can get that Bible over to the Gospel of Mark chapter 3. We are not going to be very ambitious for this teaching session. We're going to aim for only verses 16 through 19. Don't give me that look. I know it's pitiful, but hey, we have actually never done this yet. We've never taken and gone through the list of the 12 disciples and done full-on character profiles of these 12. We did not do that when we studied through the Gospel of Luke, if memory serves. Correct me if I'm wrong. And honestly, we may never do it again. When we come to these lists in the future of the 12 disciples, I may well just point you back to this teaching. This is going to be an important one for you to have a more fully developed understanding of who these 12 men were. This is a momentous moment in the movement of Christ as he looks out upon the thousands of disciples that he has at this point in time. And he chooses from those thousands and thousands, probably tens of thousands of disciples, only a number of 12 disciples that he fully intends to turn into a ministry leadership team. And it does make you question when you take a look at this list and kind of will be brushing up against this as we go down through each one of these guys and their stories, just how unlikely of choices these men were. I mean, honestly, if you were picking from thousands upon thousands, potentially tens of thousands of people, you would expect to see quite a handful of priests, rabbis, scribes, religious elite folks that are like right there at the cusp of this and ready to take that next step and just hit the ground running. But instead, that's not what Jesus does. And might I remind you, he spent the night praying about who to pick. And these weren't his picks. These were the Father's picks that the Father spoke to him through the Holy Spirit during that all-nighter. He missed an entire night of sleep. And these are the 12 that he ended up with. And it makes you want to say, are you very sure, Lord? Do you want to take another night to sleep on it? Maybe you should. No, he's got exactly the men that he wants. He's got the 12 correct men for the job, and he's going to take these unqualified, uneducated, if I may be honest, and completely unprepared men, about as far removed from the task as you could expect them to be. He's going to transform their lives. He's going to train them for less than 3 years, technically. And by the time he turns them loose on the world, they are going to turn the world upside down. He's going to make sure that these men succeed. He's going to send them out as ambassadors. Right now, they're going to be disciples for a while. That means they are being trained in the discipline of being Christ-like and everything that means, from the way that he conducts himself morally, to the belief system that he upholds, to the preaching that he does. It is discipleship to be Christ-like. And then again, as I stated, he's going to turn these men loose on the world. They're going to be his representatives or ambassadors, which is exactly what the word apostles means. And you see that word in advance of Acts 2. But it's not technically true until Acts 2. Until Acts 2, these are 12 disciples, capital D. This is an official position, an official title for these men. It is in Acts chapter 2 that they will officially become the 12 apostles of Jesus. And he told them why that was. Before you try to be a witness for me, before you try to represent me in the world, I am going to need to fill you with my Spirit, because what I need you to do, it can't be done by you. It's got to be empowered by me. So today's outline, as we're looking at it, is pretty simple. We're going to walk through the names on this list one at a time. We're going to talk about each of these 12 disciples. I'll share with you what we know and the conclusions that we draw from what we know about these men. And then eventually we are going to, part two, conclude with summary observations about these selections that are made by Jesus. I guess just to give you a quick teaser, once you study the character profiles of these men, this list becomes just even more awe-inspiring. And again, you think back to, Lord, you prayed about this all night. And how did you end up on these guys? So that's just a little bit of a teaser to let you know that the more you study these men, the more you are amazed at Christ selecting them, but also, I think I would say, the more you are comforted as a flawed human being, a flawed servant of Jesus Christ. You're going to find out these men were very, very human. And we never want to use that to condone complete inactivity. We never want to use that to condone the fact that, well, we're just not even going to try because look at how these men were and they were fine. No, we don't use that in that manner, but it does give us comfort and let us know we're not as far away as we might think that we are, especially when we look at the characters of these men on this list. Before diving in, I want to give you a couple of quick notes just based upon the composition of the list itself. First of all, a list of the 12 disciples appears 4 different times in the New Testament. First in Matthew chapter 10, then of course here in Mark chapter 3, the list that we'll take today. And then we see a list again in Luke chapter 6, and then finally Acts chapter 1. Now those lists do vary a little bit, but there is some similarity. There is some consistency across all 4 of those lists. Actually, you can take all 4 of those lists and you can divide the 12 names up into 3 sections of 4 disciples. And at the beginning of each section, we'll call it a group of disciples, groups of 4. And at the beginning of each group of 4 disciples, you're going to notice there are the same names always in place. First of all, the first name at the very top of this list every single time is who? Simon. Yep, Simon, who would become known as Peter. Yeah, he's going to be the first in the list every single time. It's because he's the rock. And that means he's also the first in this first group of 4 disciples. And when you go to the second group of 4, so skip the first 4, come to the next name, it is always going to be Philip. He always leads that second group. The third group, on the list is always going to be the name James, the son of Alphaeus. And then who's always going to be last on the list? Judas Iscariot. I heard someone say it. And I don't think you guys are even cheating and looking. That's good. Yeah, Peter is always going to be first because he's the rock, and Judas is always going to be last because he's the dog. That's just a matter of fact. There's one exception on those lists. Judas does not appear dead last in the Acts 1 list. You know why? It's because by the time of Acts 1, he's dead. Right. So he doesn't appear on that list. Otherwise, he would, and he would be dead last if he weren't dead at last. Arlyn, don't think on your feet. Just go with what you planned. So again, within each group of 4, the order does vary, but those structural anchors are always in place across all 4 lists. Now, real quickly, let's just talk about the number of disciples that Jesus chose. Why did he choose 12 disciples? He could have chosen any number he wanted here. He really liked James, Peter, and John. He could have chose 3. He could have chose 10. He could have chose 36. He could have chose 1,024. He could pick any number he wants here, but he picks distinctly 12. And the reason for that is because of the symbolic value of the number 12. In Bible numerology, the number 12 stands for or represents what? I need my Wednesday nighters here. We've studied this. It means perfect structure or perfect order. You could use the word government, okay? So anything that is highly organized in the scriptures is probably going to be symbolized by the number 12, okay? So that's important. That is largely the reason why Jesus picked that number, but not just because of sheer symbolism. The thought is that's what perfect government requires. It requires a breakup into 12. If you're going to have a council over a large number of people, 12 is a good number. So the thought there is the perfect order and the perfect structure that number 12 produces. Now, yes, Israel had 12 tribes. I think I heard someone shout that out. Yeah, okay. Israel did have 12 tribes. Now we're going to have 12 apostles in the New Testament era. But that does not mean, don't fall for this, it does not mean that the 12 apostles are going to replace the 12 tribes of Israel, and that this is fuel for the fodder of replacement theology. Don't ever fall into that. This has nothing to do with Jesus replacing the 12 tribes, moving on from Israel, and doing a completely new thing. Israel's still Israel. Their identity is still intact. The Lord has put them aside for a while. He's coming back to them. So all this really means is that the covenant has changed. It's no longer just about the 12 tribes. The Gentiles are flowing into this thing that the Lord has created. So the government structure needs to be in the New Testament what it was by theory in the Old Testament. In the Old Testament, 12 tribes of Israel meant this nation is to have the perfect order, the perfect structure, and the perfect theocratic government of God. And it means the same thing for us in the New Testament. With that in place, let's go ahead and begin reading at verse 16. Mark tells us that he, Jesus, appointed the 12, Simon, here's the first one on the list, Simon, to whom he gave the name Peter. All right, we know this man very well here in this fellowship. We love this disciple, this apostle, and of course we love to poke a little bit of fun at him, but he does give us a lot of ammunition, and one of the reasons we love to do that so much is, as I alluded to in the introduction, he was just so prototypically human that he makes us feel good about ourselves if we're being honest. You know, one minute he's got a divine revelation that Jesus is the Christ, and the next minute Jesus is basically rebuking the devil out of him. I embellish that a little bit for humor, but it's not far off. One minute he's walking on water, the next minute he's glugging water. One minute he is slicing off an ear in defense of Jesus, and the next minute he's swearing up and down that he doesn't even know the man. That's the Apostle Peter for you in a nutshell. He was a walking, talking highlight reel of both brilliance and blunder, sometimes very closely together at the same time. But again, that's why we love him. His characteristics are that he was bold and outspoken, which is a good thing, or can be a good thing, certainly. But he was also impulsive and unfiltered, which is not a good thing. So he says and does the most incredible things, but that could be an incredibly brilliant thing or an incredibly dumb thing. You just never knew what you were going to get from Simon Peter. In Mark chapter 9, verse 6, we are told that, in my own words, Peter says something dumb simply because he doesn't know what to say. He's like in that situation, like, man, it's too quiet here. This is a big moment. No one's talking. I think I'll talk. I think I'll say something. I don't have anything to say, but here we go. I'm going to shoot from the hip, whatever comes to the top of my mind. Listen, it's okay not to say anything. In fact, there are moments in time where the best thing you can do is not say anything. As that old quote says, it is better to remain silent at the risk of being thought a fool rather than to open one's mouth and remove all doubt about it. It's so true. Sometimes the best thing you can do is just zip it And that can, in and of itself, come across as self-control and wisdom. Not a bad thing for people to think about you, right? Now, to be fair to Simon Peter, most of the gaffes that we read about the man took place pre-Christ or during Christ. And then once we get the after Christ, after the ascension of Christ picture of this man, he does look pretty different. He's like an entirely different person, which is what you would expect after conversion and official salvation. He should be a new creature in Christ, right? And he is. That's not to say that he's going to be a perfect guy after that. He's not a perfect guy after that. A couple of times he tries to tell the Lord, "Not so, Lord. No can do, Senor." And that's just something you can't say. If he's Lord, you can't say, "No, Lord." If he's Lord, your only reasonable response is, "Yes, you're the Lord." But Peter tried the "not so, Lord" a couple times. And there was that one occasion that Paul tells us about in the book of Galatians where Paul had to get up in his face. He had to get in the face of the apostle Peter and set him straight. And you know what? Absolutely, Paul was right on that occasion, and Peter was wrong. So not a perfect guy, but hey, at the end of the day, all things considered, considering the fact that he is still a human being after all, even after the ascension of Christ and his baptism with the Holy Spirit, what an awesome job. He ends up as an exceptional representative of Jesus and just the perfect model of what Jesus wants to make of a person's life. After the ascension of Jesus, Peter becomes a pillar in the early church. He is very much the go-to guy in every situation. James is right up there with him. James, the half-brother of Jesus, he ends up as the pastor at the church in Jerusalem. That's very obvious from the book of Acts. But Peter, doesn't matter who's pastoring. It doesn't matter who's leading. It doesn't matter who's teaching. If Peter's around, he's going to carry a lot of weight just because of who he is and how the Lord is choosing to use him. Tradition tells us that Peter was crucified upside down on a cross because of his belief, his faith in Jesus the Christ and the resurrection. As the story goes, under the rule of Nero, after learning about his sentence to execution, he strongly requested that he not be crucified in the same manner as his Lord, because he was unworthy to be crucified in such a manner. And they took that dying man's last wish and they granted it. Instead of crucifying him on a cross like his Savior, they crucified him upside down on a cross. So if you ask me, I think he saved his worst decision for last. But what a beautiful thing we see in the heart of Peter by making that request. He did have some canonical contributions. He does write the book of 1 Peter and the book of 2 Peter. And then don't forget, Peter is, for the most part, as near as we can tell, the primary source behind Mark's gospel. When you read Mark's gospel, you're basically reading Peter's gospel told through the narrative of Mark. Verse 17, let's move on to the next guy. James, the son of Zebedee, let's take the next one too, and John, the brother of James, to whom he gave the name Boanerges, that is the Greek word. Here's the meaning. That is sons of thunder. All right, so these two guys, they belong in a pair. I took them as a pair because they're brothers. They worked together when Jesus found them. They followed Jesus together. And Jesus gives them this shared nickname, the Sons of Thunder. Sounds like a biker gang, I know, but it's not. Sons of Thunder. This was a nickname that Jesus gave them because James and John, they were just James and John. And this moniker fit them well. First, a word about James, the James that we're dealing with here. I know it's obvious, we just read it. But it's James, the son of Zebedee, and the older brother of the Apostle John. So this is not James, the son of Alphaeus, that we're going to read about in verse 18, nor is this James, the half-brother of Jesus, the non-apostle, the pastor of the early church in Jerusalem. All right, different James. Now, John we know very well. John we know as the apostle of love, or the beloved disciple, the disciple of love, the apostle of love, the beloved disciple, the disciple whom Jesus loved. That was a description that he gave us about himself. That's the way he looked at this man. I don't know how other people feel, but I just feel like I am his favorite. I can feel his love. I know he loves me. So this guy, you almost, when you're talking about John, have to start with the end product, because this guy ends up just this gentle, tender, gooey, oozy love guy. All he talks about is agape love. It's like his obsession. It's the main point in his ministry. So he's like the ultra-sensitive guy that when he's in the room, he makes the more masculine men nervous. It's like, did you hear the Apostle John's coming to our church tonight to speak? So like, get ready for the cringy stuff. I know before this is over, he's going to have us all holding hands in a circle and singing Kumbaya, my Lord. That's just John, right? And it is a beautiful, beautiful end product, but that is not at all where he started. That's being the end product of the agape love of Christ. But the nickname that Jesus gave these two men, these two brothers, tells us exactly where John started. Him and his brother James, both, they were sons of thunder. They were hot-headed. They were volatile. They were fiery. They were like overly intense. And of course, the example that comes to mind is the Samaria incident from Luke chapter 9, verse 54, when a Samaritan village rejected Jesus, and the two sons of thunder came up to Jesus and said, all right, what do you think, Lord? Should we cremate them where they stand? Should we just fry them? They don't like you, Lord? Let's just kill them. What do you say? Let's not downplay that. That is a scary temperament. That's a kind of person you don't want to have the codes to the nuclear weapon, because the slightest little bit of kickback, they're ready to go scorched earth. Imagine driving next to the guy on the road that's like that and you accidentally cut him off. That is a scary temperament for a person to have. But the Lord's going to take these two men and their violent tempers, and he's going to transform them into the image of Christ. And one of the most like picturesque snapshots of John's total transformation is there that night at the Last Supper at the table. And we're told that the Apostle John, the disciple whom Jesus loved, was leaning on the chest of Jesus. What happened to this guy? He went from alpha male to just a puddle of tender emotions and affection for the Lord. What happened to this man? Well, exactly what should happen to a man once he comes to know the grace of Christ and the love of Christ on those kinds of depths. James, if we're looking at his ministry and martyrdom, James doesn't really have much of a ministry to speak of. He does not make it very far into the early days of the church at all. By the time we get to chapter 12, we see that James is martyred for his faith in Jesus. That's Acts chapter 12. And of course, maybe you remember that story that Peter was next on the list. Herod saw how that pleased the Jews. Like they really ate that up, that Herod had James killed, the Christian pest. And so Herod came up with this brilliant idea. Okay, you know what? Let's kill Peter the next day. They'll really love that. But the Lord miraculously delivered Simon Peter that night, and he was not next on the list. The Lord wasn't ready for him to be martyred on that night. But first martyr of this group, the apostles, and He was, according to the scriptures, beheaded for his testimony in Jesus Christ. As far as the ministry of John is concerned, in Acts chapter 8, believe it or not, John returns to Samaria. And he ministers for Christ in Samaria. Did you catch the irony? This is the same guy that, along with his brother, when they were in Samaria and they didn't get a warm reception, they said, let's fry him. But now he comes back in Acts chapter 8, and not to fry them, but to preach the truth to them, the gospel, and see if the Lord might want to save some of them, because that's what grace does. It transforms you from the before and the after that we see in the Apostle John. He had canonical contributions as well, 5 of them. He wrote the Gospel of John, 1 John, 2 John, 3 John, and he also wrote the book of Revelation, the apocalypse, the unveiling of Jesus the Christ. Now, interestingly, John, the Apostle John, was the only one of the 12 apostles to survive until his death at old age, at around 100 years of age. Every other one of these 12 men end up martyred. John is the only one that is not martyred, but that was not for lack of trying. They did try to martyr John. We talked about this when we were studying through Revelation. They first boiled him. They threw him, in a boiling pot, a boiling cauldron of oil. And for whatever reason we don't know, it did not work. It did not kill the Apostle John. There's no mention on whether that scarred his appearance or not. Maybe he walked out of there completely unscathed, kind of like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He got out of the oil not even smelling like oil. It could have been. We don't know. We just know that they tried to kill him and it didn't stick. Eventually he is exiled, banished to the island of Patmos, and he's there for a while. The Lord gives him, during that time period, the vision of the revelation of Jesus Christ. He writes that all down. So he has the book of Revelation ready to give to the world. The problem is he's on a deserted island and no way to get back to us to give us that book. Lo and behold, by the providence of God, once Domitian dies, the next emperor of Rome by the name of Nerva decides to just completely overthrow the entire system of punishment that was executed by Domitian, and he rescinds the verdict and punishment of the Apostle John and has him brought back to the mainland, where the Apostle John was able to hand deliver to us the vision, the revelation of Jesus the Christ, the book of Revelation, and then go on to minister as an old man locally in the churches there. He was the pastor of the church at Ephesus for a time period and a overseer of the churches of Asia Minor, those churches that are listed in chapters 2 and 3 of the book of Revelation. He actually oversaw those 7 churches, and that was like I guess you would call that pastoral oversight. That's what an overseer over regions of churches was all about. It was pastoral oversight. So quite a ministry after all of that. And when we look at these first 3 names now that we've covered, this is not always the correct order for the first 3 guys. But for Mark's gospel, it's perfect. And I think this probably has something to do with Peter influencing the order of this list, because the first 3 men on the list, Peter, James, John, who are they? They're the big 3. Not a football conference. These are the big 3 of the group of 12. Jesus had 12 disciples, but of the 3, this was a special inner core group, and the Lord just favored them in a different way. He gave them special insight, special inclusion. He let them be privy to things that the remainder of the 12 weren't privy to. And it wasn't because he liked them the best. It wasn't because they were the cream of the crop. It was just simply, as it always is, anytime the Lord chooses folks from our groupings and chooses to elevate them or make them more public in some way or grant them special privileges, It's never because of favorites. It's never because of one person being better than the next in the church. It's always about the will of God and his special assignments. He had special assignments for these men. As a result of those special assignments, he's going to give them special training. So part of that special training means that only these three witnessed the raising of Jairus' daughter. The other guys didn't know about that. I don't know how long it took. Probably after the resurrection of Jesus and the ascension, they could finally say, oh, finally we can let the cat out of the bag. Jesus raised Jairus' daughter from the dead, and we three were there. It was also only these three to witness the transfiguration of Jesus, probably on Mount Hermon. And then it was only these three that got taken deeper into the Garden of Gethsemane on the night of his betrayal. In fact, just before it, the rest of the 12 he stationed on the border somewhere of the Garden of Gethsemane, but he took these three men deeper in with him, close enough that they could hear him pray, and eventually passed that along to everyone else so that it could be recorded for us, but so that they could see his passion, so that they could hear him praying for the Father's will. And it should have been that being privy to that, they could have taken the lead on the group, and they could have said, look, I don't know what's coming, but it's disastrous for Jesus. And yet somehow it's not disastrous for the Lord. Somehow it's not disastrous for the cause. There's hope and there's life after whatever catastrophic thing is about to happen to Jesus. Of course, it didn't work that way. But still, this is all just part and parcel to being given special assignments by the Lord, and therefore also being included in special training. I suppose you could look at it in a negative way, like these are the three that Jesus had to keep after class all the time. Like the rest of you, you're doing good. You three, come with me. You need more time. I don't think that was it, though. Let's move on to the next guy, verse 18, Andrew. All right, now here is the second of the two sets of brothers that Jesus chose. Of course, Andrew's brother is Peter, the Apostle Peter. If you want to understand Andrew, all you have to do is look at everything that Simon Peter is, go 180 degrees from that, and you basically have Andrew. He's everything that Peter is not. Peter is everything that Andrew is not. And yet that is just perfect. It's not an insult in any way. It's not to say that one is preferred over the other. This is probably just a byproduct of growing up as brothers. You know, Peter is clearly going to be the older brother and the alpha male from the beginning. So if you're Andrew, there's no way you are supplanting that as the alpha male among the brothers. You're just not beating Peter at that game. So the only thing you can really do is pick a different lane, right? Okay, he's loud and obnoxious. I'm going to be reserved and thoughtful. He's Mr. Man's man. I'm just going to be a level-headed guy. He's emotionally charged all the time. I'm just going to be kind of stable. So, steady, observant, reserved. Those are words that I would use to describe Andrew. He is a man that thinks before he speaks. Simon Peter, we're looking at you. And Andrew, he had a unique gift. One of the things that I really love about Andrew and always enjoy pointing out, he had just this awesome way of evangelism. I guess we'll call it sneaky evangelism. He had this way of evangelizing you without you even knowing it. He would just tell you what he's up to, like, oh, you're not going to believe who we found. We found the Messiah. He would tell you what he was up to, and then he'd invite you along. Yeah, this is what we're about right now. We really believe Jesus is the Messiah. So, hey, why don't you come along? Why don't you check this out for yourself and see what you think? It's a brilliant method of evangelism. His entire evangelistic approach was basically come and see. And this is exactly what he does in ministry, and he's very effective at it. Every time just about that we read about this guy Andrew in the scriptures, he's always bringing someone to Jesus. Like he's told someone and he's drugged them along to meet Jesus so that Jesus could prove to those people who he is. For instance, it was Andrew who first brought his brother Simon to Jesus. So Andrew is the human, earthly reason for the salvation of Peter. Andrew's also the guy that brought the curious Greeks to Jesus. They wanted to see Jesus, so he brings them to meet Jesus. He's also the guy that brought the boy with the 2 fishes and the 5 loaves to Jesus during the feeding of the 5,000. He's just always finding people. Hey, come meet Jesus. And I love that about him. We've shared this before, that it is perfectly legitimate to adopt that kind of method of secret evangelism for yourself as well, or sneaky evangelism. You do not have to be an apologist to evangelize. You don't have to be able to defend the doctrines of Christianity. You don't have to be forceful and like just incapable of letting someone get the edge on you in a dispute over who Jesus is or what he teaches. You don't have to be an extrovert in any kind of way. All you really have to do is invite people to church. You don't even have to say much about Jesus. You can if you want. You can tell them about Jesus. You can tell them what he did for you. You don't even have to go that far. All you really have to do is say, hey, I'd like to invite you to church. And then when they come, folks, if they do, because we know that's always a long shot, right? People constantly say, yeah, I think I'll attend there once. And then you never see them. Honestly, I've told you before that if everyone that ever promised me that they were going to attend our services came and actually attended our services, we would need a $10 million facility right now to hold them all. But hey, if they do actually come, your work as an evangelist is done. The rest is all placed on the Word of God. It's the Word of God's responsibility. Jesus speaking through his Word to tell people who he is, to convince them in their hearts, to generate the seed of faith, and then to grow that seed of faith into a tree that blossoms fruit. Early Christian tradition claims that Andrew preached in Greece and that he was arrested in the city of Patras in Greece and then sentenced to crucifixion. Out of humility, he asked not to be crucified on the same shape of cross that Jesus was crucified on. Clearly, him and his brother had been discussing this. He requested almost the exact same thing, and therefore he ends up crucified on an X-shaped cross, and of course, martyred for his faith. Tradition also claims that he preached to the crowds for 2 days while hanging out there in Patras, Greece, which goes right along with what I'm telling you. Like even in his dying days, his final 2 days, what was he doing? He was trying to bring people to Christ. Just a wonderful evangelistic approach. Reading on in verse 18, the next name on the list is Philip. All right, now if Andrew is the quiet evangelist, then Philip is the literalist disciple. He is the guy who needs everything spelled out for him. Like he wants diagrams and charts. He wants to get real specific and real detailed about everything. And who can forget that conversation that Philip had with Jesus there in Matthew chapter 14, where Jesus had just launched into this beautiful explanation of his soon departure and his inevitable reunion with the 12. And the first thing that comes to Philip's mind, the first thing that he says is, well, Lord, if you could just show us God the Father, that'd do it. That'd be good. If you could just do that. Just show us God. So he's a disciple that wants clarity. He's almost like Thomas in a sense, but he wants clarity more for the sake of, I want the details. I want the specifics. I want to know exactly how this works and exactly how this looks. He's into calculations, right? He's very precise with everything. And a good example of that is that Philip was the guy during the feeding of the 5,000 who sees the crowd of thousands and thousands of very hungry people, and he's already done up the calculations for how much money it would cost for Jesus and the disciples to take from their purse, from their bank account, if you will, and feed this multitude of people, so that by the time Jesus asked the question, hey, where shall we buy bread for all of these people to eat? Philip's response is, well, Lord, I've already run the numbers. Even 200 days worth of salary couldn't feed all these people. We can't do it. It's just mathematically impossible. That is a great snapshot of who Philip was as an individual. Tradition tells us that Philip preached in Phrygia and Hierapolis, which would be modern-day Turkey. Regarding the martyrdom of Philip, yes, he was martyred as well. He was martyred in Hierapolis. He was crucified as well. And then some accounts tell us that after he was dead by crucifixion, they took his body down and stoned his body. Like, just to show you the hatred in the hearts of people for the preaching of the gospel of Jesus Christ. Reading on verse 18, the next guy on the list. And Bartholomew. All right, Bartholomew is known as Nathaniel. That's the same man, two different names. Why does he have two names? Well, Nathaniel is his real name, his first name. And then Bartholomew would be his family name. Anytime you see bar in an untranslated Hebrew word, a transliterated Hebrew word, bar means son of. Like in your old King James Version, you used to read Simon Bar-Jonas. Bar means son of. So Bartholomew actually means son of Ptolemy. All right, so that's his family name. And Nathaniel is the guy that walks up to Jesus. And when Jesus sees him, Jesus says, "Behold, an Israelite in whom there is no guile, no deceit." Now, I love that in the Greek, because if you look at that in the Greek, the word that is used for deceit is the same word that would be translated from the Hebrew word Jacob, Yaakov. All right, so what he says there is, behold, an Israelite in whom there is no Jacob. I've told you this before, right? What does the name Jacob mean? It means excellent, excellent sound guy. That's what it means. That's what it means to us, okay? What it meant in the Bible, Jacob, the word Yaakov, meant supplanter or deceiver. So Jesus says, behold, I can't believe this. An Israelite in whom there is no Jacob, which means an Israelite that is the way an Israelite is supposed to be. He doesn't have deceit in him or guile. He's a straight shooter. He tells the truth. He tells it like it is. So it's a compliment kind of wrapped in a well-known theological joke of the day. Jesus is saying, okay, you're the honest one. You're the straight one. You're the transparent one. And, of course, Nathaniel is stunned by that. Well, how do you know me? I don't know you. Have I met you before? And Jesus goes on to tell him how he knows him. He says, oh, I know you. In fact, before you even came over here to talk to me, I saw you when you were sitting under the fig tree. And then Jesus goes on to give him proof that he did see him while he was under the fig tree. In fact, it was more than seeing him. He was reading his mind. He was knowing his thoughts. He knew the exact passages that Nathaniel was meditating upon while sitting under that fig tree. And that so convinced Nathaniel that he instantly got up and confessed Jesus to be the Christ, and he never turned back. He was just always a faithful follower of Jesus from that time forward. Rabbi, you are the Son of God, the King of Israel. So Nathan's personality would be honest to the bone, sometimes perhaps honest to a fault. He is a believer who says exactly what he thinks, whether that stings or not. Tell me honestly, are you okay with Christians like that? That just tell it like it is, whether you like it or not. Well, do your best. Try your best to be okay with Christians like that. And in the meantime, I'm going to be trying my hardest from week to week to work that out of them, or at least to teach them tact as we study verse by verse through the scriptures. Reading on in verse 18. And Matthew. Let's see how many names we have left here before I continue reading. I tell you what, folks. You know where I'm going with this before I even say it. 16, 17, 18, 19. These 4 verses, I think we need to make this a 2-parter. Lord help me, I'm so embarrassed for myself. Let's do that. Let's make this a 2-parter because I don't want to rush it. At this point, I would have to rush through. We've got some very important names on this list, which would be every single one of them that remains. And I want to go over them and give them the due attention that they deserve. So, also considering the fact that the last time we were scheduled for communion, I ran out of time and we didn't have it. Had to sleep on the couch for 2 days because Maggie made the bread. So let's spend our remaining time together in observation of communion. If the worship team, our wonderful worship team, would come back up and play gently for us. And we'll have the ushers come forward in preparation of distributing the elements of communion.